The Social Justice Advocacy Ministry is extremely important to St. James. We have an incredible history in this church, and it has been about social justice from its inception. And for Matthew 25 to happen at the time that it did, and St. James getting on board immediately, it's no surprise to me, it's no surprise to all of those members of St. James who are a part of the Social Justice Advocacy Ministry. And we are carrying forward what our ancestors of this church have done all their lives.
It's always been who we are, and we're just continuing to move that pendulum or to engage our congregation in areas that historically has been a part of who we are. We worked with other churches locally with helping our local North Carolina Extension Agency to embark on a historic food security plan that was successfully and voted on unanimously by our county commissioners. We have been asked to participate in other areas in our community, such as in housing. And we think that the plight of the Black farmer is also part of the food justice work that we want to do here in our community. So we've engaged farmers. We recently had a Black farm tour to hear what especially those older farmers said, that farming for them is not just a vocation, but something that they do out of their heart. That, working in the soil, growing vegetables is part of who they are in helping to support our communities.
Relationships are foundational to social justice work. You have to have trust to work on such controversial topics as systemic poverty and structural racism. Relationship building is the foundation of that.
The relationship between St. James and First Pres became a lot more present for all of us than it had been in the past because of the relationship that exists in our starting back in 1867, and that we were, our ancestors were slaves of members of First Presbyterian Church. Westminster has found an interest in wanting to be involved with First Presbyterian. Though those relationships among the three churches is growing. We've done that through our book study groups. We've each attended our churches respectively. Reconciliation, I feel, looks like accepting what has happened and being very active in trying to resolve and correct what happened.
The things that we got invited to participate in as a part of our social justice ministry was to be a member of the first fetal infant mortality review committee for Guilford County's health department. And that's because there's a higher rate of infant mortality, racial infant mortality happening in Guilford County as compared to other counties across North Carolina and across the nation. We look at case by case of infants who have died, infants who are from families of color, and we have the prenatal records of the birthing person who had the child who passed. And we get to investigate together. There's another 2 members from our social justice ministry who are on this committee with me from the church. We look at the prenatal visits, what happened, what did happen that was an asset, what should have happened that didn't happen. Is there any issues of structural racism going on? Are there any spiritual missed opportunities that happen? And then we come up with some action plans.
In our healthcare system, we have to think about access to healthcare and the barriers women are facing, especially women of color, and also those assumptions and that bias that doctors have in those healthcare centers about African American women who are having babies. Some hospitals are starting to do culture competency training, which is important because some doctors may not know they have that implicit bias about a population. Having a lot of the systems we live in do not recognize those issues, how it affects those underrepresented population and minority populations.
Children have creativity and they have the ability to think a little bit more outside of the box than us adults who are having to undo ways of thinking. So the seed of today is informing the young people about the truths of history, how we come into this racial arrangement, why is structural racism showing up in their lives or they've seen on the news, and so they can be creative in ways that we haven't considered yet. And so we're going to give them not only the training and the opportunity to know the facts and the history, but an opportunity to develop solutions that they want to address, so they have the ownership of it.
I think it's great, and it's great that they are reaching out to community members, people who are not a part of the church, because it's important to get those community members in as well and get their feedback, their opinion, and also getting the youth involved.
So study what is causing systemic poverty, study what's causing structural racism, just knowing what it is, how has it shown up historically in the United States. Something that would help churches is starting out with the social justice work is being open to intergenerational relationships and the wisdom from people who are more seasoned, who've maybe been there and done that. It's very important to do your self-study. So as we show up to help with problems in the world or problems in our neighborhood, at the same time, or take some time out to work on cultural humility, knowing who you are, whose you are, how are you physically showing up. It's important that we see ourselves, that God's given us eyes to see. God has given us ears to hear differences in cultures, and we need to use that and not ignore it, and use that to apply to ourselves. And people who've been working in like diversity and equity issues for a long time, and they get exhausted. We get exhausted and continue to do this work and don't see the real impacts. It's a good time to start kind of back over or refresh yourselves on what are the issues, how can we undo this, what are anti-racism principles, what's helped other people, and stand in touch.
Prayer and relationship, I think, are the keys to our ministry. And we are continually reminded by our minister, are continually reminded by one of our members that prayer is what we need to do in order to move us forward and to move our work forward.